Complex PTSD. What is it and how is it relevant to our spiritual journey? So, complex post-traumatic stress disorder is relatively self-explanatory. Um, However, over 13 million American adults are subconsciously programmed in these ways that reflect symptomatically the CPTSD. So I wanted to bring awareness to it because most of the time, in my opinion, when we bring awareness to something and we truly sit with it and we just accept it and let it be there, the solutions are able to come from the field directly to us, and we're able to alchemize those things and transmute them. And of course, it does take the shadow work, as I mentioned in the past video, to kind of even bring light and awareness to these things. But complex post-traumatic stress disorder, our body is holding on to these memories that we have, and some of the symptoms are hypervigilance, paranoia, over-explaining, overthinking. Sometimes it can manifest into actions such as over-exercising and eating disorders. It starts when, actually, I have an amazing definition here from this book. This book is really, really good, and I'm gonna do another video on my thoughts on that. But what's her name? Ariel Schwartz. She says that complex PTSD is a normal adaptation to non-normal life conditions in a person's history. So when something like that happens, a lot of times it's felt, and we create these ideas from them. We create these beliefs because of the way that another person treated us or something that happened in our childhood. So when we experience these things, we adapt certain ideas, certain beliefs, and a lot of them oftentimes are unsatisfactory, they're unproductive, and they sit there. You know, the body holds on to this memory, and your mind is this software program that's constantly integrating this new data and creating meaning from it. So creating a blueprint as to what to expect, because your brain is also like a prediction machine and it wants to know what's going on, of course. So based on that experiential interaction, that data that we've collected, we kind of have these filing cabinets in our brain where those things become concrete. And so I know for myself, I have experienced a lot of hypervigilance where I just can't relax. It's like every noise I hear, all these things going on in my head and also outside of me, I think is why meditation is so helpful. But through complex PTSD, we start to develop these avoidance and defense mechanisms, and our nervous system becomes very dysregulated, and that prohibits us from being these quantum creators that we were meant to be. So I think digging into that work, figuring out what exactly it is that's going on, and for you it might not be CPTSD, but I did want to bring awareness to that because a lot of people have these symptoms and they just kind of write it off because our culture is so anxiety riddled that we think that some of these symptoms, like attention deficit or these concentration impairments, these are actually symptoms of CPTSD. Not always, of course. I mean, some people do just have ADD, but I mean, not everyone who would be diagnosed with ADD or ADHD actually have that. It's more of just the way that the brain has adapted from these traumatic experiences. And this can also manifest as fear and confusion in intimacy, in personal relationships, not just romantic, but everyday relationships, our family, our friends. this can create a disassociation. This can create a block for us to be able to open our hearts and connect. So I just wanted to, I guess, note that. And the four main groups of the symptoms are physiological, behavioral, emotional, and cognitive. Cognitive, of course, being the way that we perceive. And this is something that's so interesting with people who have PTSD, complex PTSD, is that their self-perception becomes so thwarted. It becomes so mangled, because, I mean, there's a lot to be said about that, but when somebody has gone through something like that and they have these residual beliefs, it can basically completely detach you from your intuition. It can cause a lot of self-doubt to arise in everything. Always guessing what other people are thinking or what they're assuming, or it's always about it becomes very much about the external, and that's not what we're trying to do here. As spiritual people, we're trying to just get back to the roots of consciousness and sync back up with natural law, divine law, and how things are truly existing in the quantum field without this illusion, without this mirage of density and physicality. But yeah, the shifts in self-perception is so important because these messages that are drawn from these traumatic situations, which how I'm mostly talking about when another person has treated you very badly, whether that be an abusive situation or some type of childhood traumatic event. Of course, there's a spectrum here, but I'm basically just talking about an everyday person who has experienced some traumatic things, and it's totally distorted their self-perception. And when it comes to how they believe about themselves, their value, their worth, whether that was their fault, that's something that I personally have struggled with, where another person has said certain things or been physically harmful, and the messages that are gathered in your head are, well, maybe I did deserve that. Maybe, especially if you're being told those things, like that it's helpful for you, or that you're being properly disciplined or corrected. These underlying messages of, well, I must be bad, or I must be helpless, powerless to this situation, or maybe this is purposed, maybe this is important. All of these really low vibe, awful energies. Even when you are performing, even when you are carrying out spiritual practices of mindfulness, meditation, affirmations, positive thinking, trying to manifest a better life for yourself, trying to have a positive self-loving experience and perception, these little critters will come in and they will distort things in a way that is just very harmful. So, in conclusion, I think it's very interesting how some of these mental and behavioral adaptations from post-traumatic stress, different little events that our brain, our wise and intelligent software system, our brain downloads this information and, like I said, just categorizes it into these beliefs. So if we want to manifest a better life for ourselves, if we want to be more in control of our lives in a way, by control I mean in flow, out of survival mode, to where we can be creative, where we can be in sync with source and in tune, and we can have sincerity in our work, and we can live our organic, creator life of higher vibrations. I think if we fail to do shadow work and, I guess, digest and assimilate what we find through that shadow work, for me it was the complex PTSD. I mean, it still feels weird to even say that, because in my mind it's like, I don't have that. But the symptoms and the immense power of doing this workbook, going through this workbook, has helped me so much. I didn't even realize how much my life was ruled in these undercurrents of thought and beliefs, and starting to unravel that and work through the complex PTSD, and on the other side be such a more whole, healed, grounded human who's able to give to the world and express herself and live this clear, free, inflow life, has really been a blessing to me. And I'm not quite there yet, but I'm getting there, and I just want to document some of this stuff, and in order to raise our collective higher consciousness and make a world worth living in for all, these are the things we need to dive into and assess, and the solutions arise when we go for it, and we finally can get out of that survival mode, start creating and start being in flow with cosmic consciousness. We're in coherence. We are becoming coherent with the universe, and there's a lot of joy and goodness that can come from tackling some of these difficult and sometimes unbearable feelings. We can get through it and start living on the other side a much more peaceful and whole life. Thank you.